Welcome to the 8th episode of All Things Crypto, an Elk Finance podcast. I am Fareed.
And I'm Shiloh, also known as LT Snake Plissken.
Today we are discussing lending and borrowing.
So keep in mind, we're not financial advisors. We don't look like financial advisors, and in this case, you can judge us by our looks. This is not financial advice. If you're looking for financial advice, please find a licensed advisor in your area.
Our mission in this Elk Finance podcast is to provide resources to people who are interested in crypto.
So if we get something wrong, please let us know. We really welcome your feedback, right? As I always say, we want to learn. We're here to share stuff. Let us know on Telegram. Tell me directly at t.me/elk_finance_chat and message me at LT Snake Plissken.
Perfect. Now let's just start with a very simple question about what is lending and borrowing?
Well, lending and borrowing obviously exists in the real world, just similar to how it exists in the crypto world. Now, how I kind of like to describe it is banks break your kneecaps when you don't pay afterwards, while crypto breaks them in advance and then sometimes breaks them more if you don't really pay.
I love that. That is really true, actually, because in a typical bank, when you're trying to borrow, you put some collateral in, and after that you borrow it. And as it was said, if you don't pay it back, you're in trouble. But in terms of crypto, what is it?
So with crypto, basically you take a certain asset that you already own, right? So, in a traditional bank, right, you take out a mortgage, they got to check how much money you have coming in, they got to check your assets, they got to check all these things to make sure that you can potentially keep paying back the loan. But with crypto, you actually put your assets, you freeze them in a contract in advance. So you take, let's say, one Ethereum, let's say, and you collateralize it. You freeze it in a smart contract. They hold it for you. But the thing is, you might only get 80% of that, 90% of that in a borrowed asset. So you lend that Ethereum, and then you get to borrow something else, like a stable coin or another token, and it really depends. You can get a varying amount of that other token. Now, that depends on how risky that token that you put as collateral is. If you've kind of put a more risky token in than Ethereum, if you lent with Doge, for example, right? If you lent with Dogecoin, you would probably not get as much of a borrowed asset as you would had you collateralized with Ethereum.
Oh, we are really happy that Elon is hopefully not listening here.
No, don't worry, he is not listening.
Because he's a big fan of Dogecoin, and that's a stablecoin to him.
Yeah, it must well be. It's been at like 23 cents forever. So, but yeah, if the idea is here, if the asset you borrowed, so I lent Ethereum and I borrowed, let's say, elk, and the elk I borrowed increases in value in relation to the Ethereum. So Ethereum stays the same, or maybe goes lower, and my elk that I borrowed using my Ethereum as collateral, the elk I borrowed increases in value. That, after it crosses a certain threshold, can result in a penalty, and that's what they call liquidation. Mm-hmm. So that is a scary word, right? But really, in this case, we look at an average fee of between 3 and 15% of whatever asset you lent. Let's say the Ethereum in this case, you lent to borrow the elk. And remember, you actually only got, 80%, 90% of the elk you could have, because the Ethereum you lent is over collateralized, meaning you lend, like I said, you lend more than you actually get to borrow. But if you take that elk and you pay back, that loan, you pay back what you borrowed, and then it releases your Ethereum minus the fees. So the fees here for most protocols, we're looking at like Agave on XDAI, even AAVE or Compound. You're going to get maybe a 2% per year fee. So the fee for borrowing isn't going to break the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you pay back, it's minus those from your collateralized asset. In this case, Ethereum, to take out the elk. So you end up with a little less ETH than you would have had you just held it. So yeah, the idea is they really will take the difference. They'll take a little bit of a penalty to mitigate risk for people who are lending you the assets.
But this is very important. I just want to highlight this. The catch here is you have to keep your eye on the evaluation of the tokens you're putting
right
in as a collateral and the tokens you're borrowing.
Right.
Because any fluctuation can heavily impact how your investment is going to go forward.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to really watch that. So, it's a great thing if the asset you borrow and then, let's say, sell, right? Mm-hmm. You borrow and sell an asset because, you think it's going to go down.
Yeah.
Right. And then you buy that asset back and you pay back your loan when as it's gone down, and you kind of keep the difference. So that's kind of one of the main purposes that we'll get into later. But so it's a little bit of a risk-reward gambling situation.
That's right. There is something called flash loans. What are those?
Those are tricky. Now, flash loans, you've probably heard of them, and you probably hear them most when it comes to flash loan attacks. You hear about projects getting hacked or that are vulnerable to flash loans, because they are an interesting thing. And when you first mention them and you're like, why does this even exist? So what a flash loan is someone needs no collateral, like zero collateral. So you don't need any assets other than gas to cover the transaction initially. All you need to do is you basically borrow these assets, and you can make you have to make multiple transactions. So you would do something, you would start this contract, you would then do something with that asset you've borrowed in a flash, and you could swap it for something else. You could call any function, but the thing is here, you have to do it. You have to return the asset to you within one block, so of the blockchain moving.
That is literally flash.
That's literally a flash, like Ethereum, which is that's like what, 6-7 seconds, maybe if you're lucky, 4 seconds. So you have to execute multiple transactions within that time. So basically, you borrow it and return it before it's owed. Otherwise, the whole thing gets reversed, right? So you can't just borrow something and send it to your Binance wallet and cash it out to your real money, because it wouldn't be captured in that block. It would go once that block would be verified, it would realize that yes, you took out the flash loan, but it wouldn't see it having been repaid in the same block, so the whole thing would be reverted.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are they typically used for?
So besides exploiting vulnerabilities in smart contracts, you're wondering like why else? That's all I've heard of it for. And there's actually a few different cool uses, and the biggest, most common one is arbitrage. And if you want to learn a little bit more about arbitrage, you should head back to our previous episode where we covered it. And but basically, it serves to buy cheaper on one protocol, buy token A on one protocol, and sell token A at a higher price on a second protocol, and pocketing the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, you can do that within one block if you set those, set those up within that block. You could, for example, take a flash loan of, let's say, DAI, of XDAI on the XDAI network. You could then buy some agave on Elk, where it's a little bit, let's say, cheaper on the Elk DEX, and then you could see that it's maybe a little bit more expensive on HoneySwap. So then you swap your agave for back to XDAI on HoneySwap, selling it for a little bit more, and then in the same block paying your XDAI back to the flash loan, right? And then you keep whatever difference that arbitrage was. Now, obviously, people, individuals, aren't able to do this. Nobody can click that fast, and the websites wouldn't load that fast. So that's where you got to be kind of a developer, or use something like frucombo.app, which we'll link in the description. You kind of create a plan of what you're going to do, and it's automatically executed. So it's like boom, 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 way faster than any human can kind of click.
Mm-hmm.
So that transaction is executed all at once, so that it can complete within the block. So yeah, that's arbitrage is one of those uses you would use something like that for. If you have a token, you're kind of new, you notice that your token fluctuates in price because you have liquidity on multiple dexes. You could totally, arbitrage between those two dexes automatically using a bot that maybe takes flash loans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things. The other thing here is what's called a collateral swap. Now, this gets progressively more complicated. With the collateral swap, you would replace the token that you use as collateral with something else of equal value, or perhaps move it to another protocol. And you could do that fast within one block. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I would encourage you to kind of take a Google and read more in depth into what that looks like. And I want to move on to the third piece here, which is self-liquidation. That would be another reason why you might do a flash loan. Now, that sounds terrible, self-liquidation, but basically it means, as I said before, if your asset that you provided as collateral, that ETH in our ETH to Elk loan, where we lent ETH and borrowed Elk, if that Ethereum starts to depreciate in value, it starts to not be as valuable in relation to the Elk that you've borrowed, right? Because the Elk is increasing in value, thus making ETH worth less. So it doesn't cover as much of the borrow. Then what you might want to do is it's approaching that penalty zone of that 3 to 15%, where you can get penalized. Then you can take that and take out a loan, right, of the ETH. You could pay it back and then sell whatever, even though it's worth less, it's going down, right? You could sell that ETH, take a little bit of a loss, versus that 3 to 15% or more liquidation cost if it continued to plummet in relation to the elk.
Yeah, I think what everybody needs to keep in mind. Lending and borrowing in a context of crypto is not like a traditional sense of buying a house. You get a mortgage, don't worry about it for 25 years. Once in a while, go and change your interest rate and you're good to go. Here, you have to always keep your eye on it, because any fluctuation and any sharp drop or sudden drop in the prices can just eat through your collateral so quickly that you can get nothing for it back. It's really really time sensitive and requires quite a bit of attention to details to make sure that you are in a sweet spot and you're holding the right tokens.
Absolutely. And of course, another risk of flash loans is if you're on somewhere like Ethereum, the gas cost for that is going to be not small, right? So that is something. But yeah.
Yeah, but you have to remember that your gas costs are high, but you're not collateralizing it. So,
right.
It's just nothing is free. You have to give something to get something. So
that's right.
So the other question comes to my mind is when and why would you consider lending or borrowing?
Yeah, and I think we've been overly kind of cautionary so far in talking about it. So I think it's important to talk about the reasons why you would. These exist; they're popular. Places like Agave and AAVE and Compound are popular. They exist. They're up there. So why do people use them? And the number one way we kind of already mentioned is shorting a borrowed asset. So let's say in this example, let's stick with the same pairing, right? We take some ETH and we collateralize it for some elk, and we do this thinking that we think that the elk is going to go down in value at some point. So we take our ETH and we borrow elk, and then we sell that elk at the price it is now, betting on the fact that that elk value is going to go down. So we sell elk, let's say, for a stable coin. We wait a day or two, that however long we think it's going to take, and then if we're lucky and we're expert market predictors and we all know how predictable crypto is, it's not, but and let's say it pays off and elk goes down and we were right. If elk goes down in price, then you buy back that elk, then you pay back the borrowed asset that you borrowed, ending up with more elk than you had, releasing your ETH in this case. Mm-hmm. So you end up with some extra elk without having, gotten rid of the ETH you, let's say, wanted to hold. So this way you can kind of make those gambles. You didn't really sell anything, and you didn't spend a whole lot because the cost is something around 2% APR over a year to borrow. So if you pay that back in a couple of days, that's 0.000 whatever, very little. And you made more elk in the end. Another reason why you might want to get involved in lending and borrowing is lending. Lending carries almost no risk at all, especially with, protocols like Agave or AAVE or Compound. They are audited. They've got a lot of features that keep things balanced. The risk is really on the borrowers. So the lender carries very little. And they've got these formulas and these smart contracts that execute right away so that the lenders aren't losing money and so that it's always profitable. And yeah, it really feels like, sometimes people don't want to bet with their own money. So their own assets. So if they can pay back more than they borrowed, it's really, a win, right? On both. So, yeah.
among listeners, somebody wants to go down the path of lending, they have to keep in mind that, yeah, the risk is low, but the reward is low too. Do you want
Yes.
to touch on that?
Absolutely. So, even if you are lending for like a flash loan provider, which sometimes these flash loans, if executed correctly, you've seen the amount of destruction and money that they can earn on each flash loan. If it's successful, remember it has to be successful to go through. If they're each protocol will take something like 0.09% of every flash loan of the profit side. So if you don't meet those requirements, again, it doesn't succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that piece. Um, so 0.09 per successful flash loan, usually isn't a whole lot distributed amongst all the people who are lending.
Mm-hmm.
Just the same, a lot of the APRs are somewhere around 2 to 5% on a lot of these protocols, right? If you lend, you just lend, let's say your DAI or USDT or ETH, yeah, you're looking at something about 2% a year. So it's not huge. It's not a massive benefit for doing those things, though it's low risk, right? So, if it's beats holding it.
That's right. But when you're putting it in the context of some staking or farming you do in elk,
Yeah.
I really advise people who are considering this choice to look at the options of staking and farming to see if they can get a better yield out of their investment.
Absolutely. And if you are in a place where all you want is a stable coin and you want it to just hang out and make money on your money, well, heck, a guaranteed 2% a year isn't anything to scoff at if you're not taking any risk by having USDC or something like that, and staking that on agave, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not going to find too many, places where you can stake single, US stablecoins and make something on it. So, if you're gonna set it there and forget about it, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty good, right? Yeah.
So if you want to classify the risks for lenders and borrowers, what would those risks be?
Well, I mean, like we've said, the risks are you have to really be on top of something if you've borrowed. If you've borrowed something, you really want to make sure you don't get liquidated. You got to read up on at what point the asset you lent that's collateral, at what point that would start to get penalized, that 3 to 15%. So you know when to pay it back and walk away, even if you've lost. So that's where that gambler's fallacy can kick in, right? We think, oh man, I've come this far, it's got to go up, and we just kind of end up keep going and going until it's all gone. So we really need to pay attention to it and be on top of it. That's a risk.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. But you have to guys remember, this is not something like a bad investment you can stick to it forever because every time they are liquidating, they are eating through your collateral. And this party cannot last forever.
Right. And so we got to remember that another risk is that interest rates can change quickly, especially when a lot of people want to borrow an asset, but there's not a lot of lenders. That basic supply and demand thing. So you got to keep an eye on your interest you're paying because that could increase if something, the asset you're borrowing suddenly becomes in super demand, right? So you might think you're making a profit when really, there's a huge demand on that elk you're borrowing. So you start to have to pay eventually more. You cuts into your collateral when you eventually cash out. But then I guess it's not really a risk. But as I said, the lower risk for lenders, so the rewards are smaller. So that's another downside. But if you're making a lot of educated guesses and you kind of want to play with your money without actually making transactions, and I think the lending and borrowing is worth exploring. And so like you could learn, if you Google agave, and check them out. Read up on their docs, what they have to offer, chat with them in their Telegram. I think there's a lot of benefits to things like that, to lending and borrowing protocols, and they have their place within the DeFi ecosystem. It's just that please make sure you do read this so you know what you're risking and you know what can go right and what can go wrong. So that's that do your own research part, especially.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other part of it is just start small. It's just you can read as much as you want, but at the end of the day, when you don't have a skin on the game, it's a little bit different. When you start kind of with a small amount, it's manageable. At the same time, you're learning so much regarding what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah, that's a good point. So putting down a little bit, testing it out, see how it works, and yeah, give it a shot. But yeah, I think that's all we have for today. As always, thank you so much for listening and urge you to check out our other episodes. And again, if you've got any feedback, you can reach us on our Telegram, our Elk Finance chat. That's t.me/elk_finance_chat. And you can find me at the handle at LTSnakePliskin. And please check the description for some more details on the episode and any links we mentioned.
Thank you again for being with us in this episode, and we will see you in the next episode.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.